So I think I'm going to get us started and welcome everybody to the CLCC Research Seminar, which today is it's quite a special to all of us who are educators, language educators, and you may be wondering, language learning, but actually this talk is going to be about general learning and it's going to be a space where we hope to reflect together on how can we make our practices in assessment better. How can we engage students even more with, the dreaded summative tasks that they have to be put through? How to also tackle certain things such as how do we assess a student's knowledge and abilities and skills in a world where they can easily just simply ask a large language model to do the work instead of them. So in a way, David Tual and Jan Bogdanovic, they are coming today to visit us from the Center for Languages and Intercommunication at the Department of Engineering at the University of Cambridge. And this is why, in a way, I welcome them with a smile, because there aren't that many people out there in the languages world who actually deal just with the STEM students. I would also like to mention that, our colleagues are here also representing the GELS network, which is a global engineers, languages and skills. And I know all of us have seen each other in person in different conferences, training days, but I believe the work that all of our colleagues in Cambridge do at CLIC is actually commendable. And I'm going to also mention some cities, some countries, some institutions, because it's just beautiful to see that we're welcoming colleagues from Imperial, thank you for being here, colleagues from King's, colleagues from Westminster, from Nottingham, to whom we send all of our love and thoughts, to the Sorbonne, from Belgrade, from Dublin, from Sydney, from Princeton. I mean, if we could do a big show of hands, we would, but we are not going to do a big show of hands just yet. I hope that this big show of hands happens at the end of this session. So our speakers are going to have around 34 to 40 minutes to tell us about promoting autonomy and purpose in language learning using reflective language portfolios. And a reminder that this is about the generalities of learning. So when we talk about language portfolios, it could be about any type of portfolio. So maybe we should have called it assessment portfolios. We'll then have around 10 minutes for Q&As. So at the moment, if you've got any burning questions whilst you're listening to a colleague's talk, please add them to the Q&A. Otherwise, we will have time at the end to take questions. And a reminder to everyone in the audience that a recording of this session will be taking place so that we can keep this on the website in case you want to share it with friends and family. And I am going to shut up now. And David Tual, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ilya. Thanks for the very kind introduction. It sounds like a very ambitious plan, so we'll try not to disappoint anyone. Thank you for having us. Sorry we couldn't make it in person, but as you pointed out, it's great that we can have such a wide audience. And I'm sure Ilya will have the opportunity to meet very soon again. So I'm delighted also to be able to present this with Jan, because we've had many discussions on portfolios over the last 3+ years that Jan has been working in CLIC. So it's also a personal pleasure on that level. Sorry, Ilya, I couldn't help myself, but pointing out that we could have actually a presentation entitled. Sorry, trying to move my slides. Yes, we were a bit surprised, Jan and I, by the advertisement that circulated, because those are the pictures that we have on our website, and we were quite impressed by the transformative power of AI, because the advert on the Imperial website looks like that. So I'm going to get in touch with my dentist and ask him about how we can get this new set of teeth for myself. Anyway, joking apart, we'd like to start with a quick Menti. So we're hoping that the technology is going to work. So those of you on the other side of the screen, if you could scan that QR code, and there's a couple of questions, and Jan will be sort of managing we'll probably have to switch screens at some point. If you could just answer those two questions. The first one is about who you are, because we can see a lot of names that we know of, and we're obviously language teachers. we suspect there might be other people here who are not language teachers, so it'd be interesting to know who the audience is. And the second question is about what you understand by reflective portfolio. So we'll give it maybe a minute so that everybody's got a chance to scan the code. And Jan, if you want at some point to share your screen so we can have a look at the results, assuming that everything is working fine.
I can confirm that the Menti can be accessed. So
Okay,
we have started responding the first.
Let's see whether we've got. Okay, so we do have some results, which is even better.
Yeah, it's just the pacing, David. We have to go question by question. I couldn't do that.
Okay, sorry. So fair enough. Okay, so right, so we've got 20 last answers so far. So a majority of language teachers, as we could have expected. I just realized we had a typo in languages, but hey, that happens even to language teachers. And then, so yeah, a few others, even people who don't teach. It's great to have a wide audience. And maybe shall we move to the next question? This time you have to type. So yeah, actually, the word "what does portfolio" means to you. So just 3 words that come to mind when you hear portfolio.
Yeah, and thank you for the very nice introduction as well from my side. It's really to the point. We're not going to talk much about AI, but we're happy to discuss it later. And all of the things that we have designed have been designed with having AI in the back of our minds, asking these very difficult questions about assessment. And these portfolios are truly a part of our assessment. So that's very important to keep in mind. But more importantly, as Iria pointed out, they are about actually helping the learning process, right? So any good assessment should assess learning that takes place, or that has taken place.
Yeah, so we have already some very interesting words on there. And obviously reflection, I mean, I guess the title sort of give it away. Reflection is something we associate to portfolio. Obviously a collection of work. I like the fact that process is there quite big as well, because it's, we'll talk about it, more about the process than the product. Skills is a word very dear to me, as some people in the room will know, because I've seen some people from the Gels network, so we know that the S stands for skills, and it's part of what you develop also alongside the portfolio. And some, a range of words. I saw boring somewhere, which I think is maybe something that we can be a preconception about the portfolio, and some portfolio are definitely boring. I'd agree with that. And also hard work, and anyway, so I'll go back to the slide. Thanks for sharing. It's interesting. Jan, you want to comment?
I mean, just to add, the interesting thing here is that it becomes apparent that portfolio is actually very blurry, even though we have a few concepts in the core that many people understand many different things about portfolios, and we will obviously today introduce the portfolio that we are using. But it is more of a blurry concept with like a lot of side meanings and a lot of things where people understand things differently. So that was the only thing to add from my side. David, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, right. So I'll share this again. Right. Okay. Right. So thank you for your input on this, everybody. Okay. So I'll start with a bit of background for those of you who are not familiar with Click. So in our center, we offer 5 foreign languages, so French, German, Spanish, Chinese, and Japanese. Most of our courses run for 15 weeks, and it's 2 hours of contact time per week, with a range of levels going from beginners to advanced. One of the specificity of our provision in Click is that we welcome undergrads, postgrad, but also staff on the same courses. So it's an interesting mix, and definitely something I recommend, because it adds a certain dimension to courses. Anyway, so I wanted to show you a bit about where we've gone through. We've gone from pre-COVID to post-COVID because we started really embracing more thoroughly the concept of portfolio after COVID. We did have maybe the old boring sort of portfolio pre-COVID, which was essentially just coursework, if you like, that students were completing. It was set by the teacher, and there was a small proportion of the assessment. We also had an oral exam, like for any language course, you can imagine, and then obviously a final exam that covered the rest of the skills. That was the bulk of the assessment. If the students completed the exam, then they got a certificate stating the course they completed. Post-COVID, we switched things, so we decided to go for a reflective portfolio. So not just tasks that we set. The students had a lot more freedom. They also had to reflect on their learning process, and we completed that with a viva, essentially a bit of a big word for an oral exam, but because we wanted it to be really an opportunity also to discuss what was in the portfolio, a bit like we do for a viva for a PhD. And we replaced also the certificate by digital badges that the students can then share on their social networks. So really, I want to tell you a bit about the guiding principles behind the portfolio. And so, yes, COVID really was a catalyst. I guess we would have got there eventually, but I think having had to deal with the emergency of the COVID situation, that helped us to make this decision, and we had to get rid of exams, and we never looked back and never went back to exams. And I think I can safely say that everybody in CLIC is quite happy not to go back to exams. And the two really key guiding principles behind our approach was focusing on autonomous learning, so really to make students aware that they had to become lifelong learners, and to also get them to think about how to learn and to become accountable for their own learning. And the second idea was really to have a personalized pathway, which means that students could really focus on what was of interest to them, whether on a personal basis or whether it was connected to their studies, as long as they could really do something that was of their own choice. So that not two students want to get the same out of the course, and that's reflected also in the portfolios we get. So as I said, 50% is a reflective portfolio. So it's obviously evidence of their work, but also of their reflections. And the idea is really to put the responsibility on the students to provide evidence of their learning process, and also obviously of the objectives they've met. And the second element of viva, which I talked about earlier, is already to obviously make sure that they've really engaged truly with the reflective portfolio, that what they included in the portfolio is really something they've engaged with fully, including the reflective aspect. And then obviously also we have to make sure that they actually are at the level of the course. So because the viva is conducted in the target language, then we can assess whether they are able to truly communicate, so they can talk about the portfolio. Obviously they know that they will be, maybe grilled is not the right word, but we'll discuss the portfolio. So then they can expect some of the questions, but there's also an element of, sort of improvised conversation, and very close to life scenarios, if you like. And really, so carrying on with the idea of guiding principles, the idea was really to put the responsibility onto the students. That's why we wanted not just a portfolio, but a reflective portfolio. And one quote that both Jan and I use very often is one by Dewey, stating that we do not learn from experience, but we learn from reflection on experience. It might be nearly a century old, but we feel it's very relevant, and maybe even more relevant nowadays. So just to give you a bit more details about what we understand by reflective portfolio. So it's student-led, so that's really important. We give a lot more power to the students. It's also very personal. It's a collection of works and of reflections, and it aims to foster autonomy, critical thinking, and meaningful learning. And that definitely can apply to not just languages. So it's individual in the sense that the students will choose what they include in the portfolio, the sort of tasks that they include, the format. We also encourage them to use a range of medium in terms of both input and output, so video, text, recordings, any sort of production they want to include. We do expect them to devote about 2 hours a week of self-study. And then the last element is that there are a few constraints because we quickly realize that giving too much freedom to the students can actually be something that they don't feel very comfortable with. So we have a few key requirements that they have to meet. So a few boxes to tick. And at this point, I'll pass on to Jan, who can really share more about his personal experience. Jan, do you want to you just tell me when you need me to change the slides, okay?
All right. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, David. Yes, again, thank you all for the input. Yeah, I'd be also interested to discuss the question of the pretentiousness later, but maybe just to say, I also have sometimes trouble with the terminology. I think a portfolio can be very pretentious if it's just a collection of homework, really. And I hope to fill what we do with a little bit more life and give you a better impression of the principles that David has just explained and the development in more action and a little bit more based on our practice. I'm just setting my timer. So the first idea, as David has explained, is really putting the responsibility and accountability for learning on the students. And in a way, this is just phrasing something that is actually evident because in the end of the day, we cannot learn for the students. We cannot learn the language for them. And we cannot also take the responsibility for it. And just to start with an anecdote, one thing that I usually do when I start the language learning portfolio process with them is that I ask them, the students, who is responsible for learning a language. And our students usually come up with the answer that it's ultimately them being responsible. And then we discuss what's the responsibility of the teacher. And usually we end up in saying, well, it's providing opportunity and guidance in that learning process. And I think this is the guiding idea that we have with our portfolio, is to help students to reach the goals that they want to reach and that they need for their personal and professional development, together with them in a dialogue on eye level. And I like to start with this picture. And sometimes we can see progress and language learning, language improvement as climbing a hill. But what we sometimes forget is that people climb hills in various different ways and directions. They all want to get better at learning the language, but they enjoy different things and they have ultimately different things that they want to achieve by learning the language. So the starting point, David, if we can go to the next slide. The starting point for our process, and I really like the fact that process was on here because I think this is really one of the key elements of the portfolio. It's not just a collection of finished homework, but it's work in process, is that we start with developing a vision. And the guiding question here is, how is learning German or any other foreign language, or to pick up what Iria said, any skill that you put your mind to, how are you going to benefit from it? How is it going to make your life better? And not to be misunderstood, we don't want to kind of go from a very economic neoliberal understanding here. It could be that student says, well, I just enjoy learning. I just enjoy learning a language. Or it could be that they have heritage. Some of them are actually Germans with a Jewish background whose grandparents were fleeing Germany and now think about becoming German nationals. It could be also that they pursue a career in the other country or in Germany or in this German-speaking world. So we start with like reflecting on this, and then from that, if we can go further, a vision sometimes can be very far away. So when you start and your goal is to be able to navigate fluently in another country in a foreign language, this can be quite far away. And so in the next step, we help the students to develop SMART goals that can be reached by the end of term or by the end of the year. And from these SMART goals, I will also give you examples of SMART goals and how we use them in a second. But from these SMART goals, the students then develop habits and activities that they do on a weekly basis to reach their SMART goals, which ultimately hopefully help them to reach their vision. And what we have realized is that one key aspect of this, really not to end up as a pretentious collection of homework, is how to implement feedback. And what we do now, after a few rounds and a lot of discussions, and actually also through the postgraduate certificate in teaching and learning and higher education that I did finish this year, we thought a lot about the feedback process that is necessary for learning in general, but also within our portfolio approach. And we will discuss this later as well. So if we go from here to the workbook, so what I'm sharing with the students right now is a Word document, which I quite enjoy. A shared Word document has lots of advantages to Moodle, in my opinion, but that's a different question. So they will have in the first week a task of creating their vision. How could improving learning the skill, the language, make a difference in your life? I usually leave it up to them to answer this question in the target language or in their native language, depending on how able they are to actually connect to these goals. Because what's important here is not the language practice in that first week. What's important is that they truly reflect what they ultimately want to achieve. And I think I'd be very interested in conducting a study myself, whether a strong vision that actually makes sense apart from, my teachers thought it was a good idea, or my parents thought, or actually strong vision leads to sustained motivation and better language learning results. In week 2, and this is all very meta, right? During this time, we are quite in the meta process, not yet in the language learning process. We ask them to transfer their vision into 3 SMART goals that can be achieved, and keep a SMART goal tracker. I will explain that idea a little bit more in just a little while. And then we slowly get into trying out activities and habits that they have either found or designed themselves to reach their SMART goals. And usually what I started doing even more this year is that we have a session where everyone comes together and we discuss actually language learning. So we discuss the input hypothesis, we discuss the importance of chunking, and the elements of practice, but they also share in that session a lot of the resources that they might have found in their first weeks of developing the portfolio so far. So if we go to the next slide, we see an example of a SMART goal. And it's really just to keep it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So it's like the goal needs to be one that can be achieved by the end of term. It needs to be relevant to their vision. It needs to be something that can be measured. And that's really just for psychological purposes here, because if I tell myself, oh yeah, I'm just going to do, I'm going to learn 5 words every day. But then if you haven't really defined what learning means, some students tend to beat themselves up and said, oh, but I haven't really learned these words. So that's mostly for that, and also to create an accountability, but not one that leads to like endless self-punishment. And yeah, and being very specific is actually connected to that. The important thing here is that I don't know if some of you have worked with SMART goals. One thing that many people report is that students write SMART goals in the beginning. Let's say they say do 20 minutes and they fail, and then they consider the whole goal to be failed and they don't pick it back up. So the reason why I'm using a SMART goal tracker and the idea that these goals need to be developed over time is exactly because of this. So what I would probably like to see is if we can go to the next animation, that they maybe find out that they don't like using flashcards. Maybe they found something that's even better, like Anki, which might work for them. Maybe they find that 20 minutes was actually way too ambitious. As David said before, they have 2 hours of class. We expect them to do 2 hours every week for language learning. Maybe they thought they had more time than 10 minutes. Maybe they thought it was 20. But rather than dropping that whole goal, it's making adjustments to it and working on these goals constantly, which is actually the key to working with these SMART goals. Yes, which is why we have the tracker. If we can just look at this is just an example of what this will look like in their portfolio. Sometimes they feel like they want to develop like a habitual goal, something that they can do on a regular basis, like an online course, but maybe they don't know yet which online courses are around. And so they have to define it a bit more closely. But the goal number 2 is actually just a bit more compact version of what I just shown you on the previous slide. And then in that Word document, you will also find an activity tracker where they will put in everything they've done during the week. There's a lot of descriptional elements in it, resources that they used, but most importantly, that they can, on the plus and the minus side, they can write about what went well and what didn't go well. And then also make a few comments. For example, if you look at the very low bottom one in week number 8, the comment could be skip activities when they are too easy. And this will lead to the students actually reflecting on growth, being more aware of how much time they actually did invest, and having at the end of the day a really, really nice overview of the work that they have done. One thing that you don't see now is that there's also a week-by-week entry where they are supposed to upload evidence of things they've took. So if they have written a text, they will upload it, or a screenshot, or link to resources that they have built. Yeah, exactly. So this is the next important and nice element of this. And I was mentioning my PG cert earlier. Unfortunately, I didn't get ethics approval because I never thought I would actually publish or talk about this in public. But what I can do is I can give you very vague outcomes of this. So I had 5 interviews that I then thematically analyzed. And it was about what students at Click are looking for in feedback. And maybe everyone, if you like, share a few things in the chat. What do you think students in general are looking for? So if we can have like a couple for mistakes. If I can just have a few ideas of what students are looking for in feedback. Reassurance and guidance on what to do next. Very nice. Guidance for improvement, justification of grade. Very nice. Grades. Mark, oh, that's very, very interesting because the way we see feedback is formative feedback. So we usually try to differentiate between assessment, which is summative feedback, and formative feedback. So when I say feedback, it might be a very German thing. I'm talking about formative feedback. And even though it is formative, students, David, if we can go on. Thank you, everyone. I think I just read acknowledgement is perfect. They are looking for somewhat praise, and they are looking an acknowledgement, and they are looking for actionable feedback. A lot of the things I have actually read here. Feed forward, really important. The next step, which I read, really important. But let's think about praise for a second. So students they want that praise, they want that acknowledgement. But as educators and professionals, we also have to make sure that we don't endanger their mental well-being and their development as a person, as well as their professional and skill development when we give them that praise. And one thing that various studies have shown is that it is quite important to not praise the person, because if we praise people, a lot is at stake when that praise doesn't come, maybe, or when you put a lot of your value on that teacher praise, but rather praising work and processes. And obviously, it still feels nice, right? If someone praises something that we have produced or that we have done, and that feeling is not problematic. But when we feel like it is praise on the person, so it's really important to not say, well, you are a great student, or I think you're doing really well, but like to say, well, this piece here is fantastic, and maybe you can even do more of that, which already leads to the next aspect, which is actionability of feedback. What is actionable feedback? I will keep this fairly short because everyone is quite aware. If everyone thinks about it for a moment, we don't have to necessarily share in the chat here. But if we go on, David, to the next one. Well, is this actionable? Learn 100 words every day. I think most of us language teachers will say, well, no, because usually words are not learned in a day. It takes like spaced repetition, and 100 words a day is even more unrealistic. But, and that's the next bit, what actionable is depends on the student ability and his goals and the expert teacher knowledge, which I just said, right, that we know it needs spaced repetition. So it's not actionable, the goal that we see here. But it needs to be developed in a dialogue between teacher and student, because it's not enough that I know that this isn't actionable. The student also has to know. And I have to know which words he wants to use and learn in the future. So yes, I think it's important that we understand feedback as not a transmission anymore of just information, mistakes, things to improve, fast forward. All this is very good, but this feedback needs to be heard. So the student needs to be open about it and wanting that feedback. That feedback needs to be understood, right? Because sometimes there's a misunderstanding. A student might confuse a preposition with a pronoun, and the whole feedback that we've written up for 20 minutes goes down the drain. Yes, and it needs to be about the next step, not about like what to do in general, but like very specific about where do I go from here, not in 2 weeks, but like what's the next thing I can fix, I can do to move forward, feed forward. Love that term. And the last thing before we can jump into discussion is a dilemma that I came across when I was writing feedback in the last years to my students. So just to give you a bit of background, I have usually throughout the year 50 odd students that I have to give feedback on. They all produce something every week. And that led to a lot of feedback time that I had to spend. And if you think about it, when you have only 25 pieces of work to give feedback on, and how much time do you spend on this in total, considering that you have to download a file maybe, or that you have to open a Moodle page and go to the student, and all of this. And then, how do you distribute that time? So maybe you could think like, how much time do you spend per student on average? If you say 20 minutes, you end up at like 8.5 hours, which is a lot. And like I said, I have 50 students. They do something every week. So there's a problem on how to distribute that time. And I'm sure a lot of you make that very same experience. We can go on to the next page. So one of the problems that is actually not necessarily yet the one that is being portrayed here is that many times we spend a lot of time on those students that actually haven't put a lot of effort into the task, because we feel like we have to correct all their mistakes. And the problem is that those students where we spend a lot of time in feedbacking that haven't spent a lot of time on the initial task, maybe because they were busy doing other things, which is perfectly fine. But we actually did spend much more time on these students than we do spend on the students that put in a lot of work into the task, whatever it is that we're doing. And also, student mailboxes, I think, do look like this. Our mailboxes look like this. And there's another feedback that comes in that they could potentially look at, but they might not. And that can lead to very, very frustrating experiences for all of us, because the feedback that we do have is not actually doing the job, and we have invested time that didn't pay off. So to tackle these problems and to really give feedback the room it deserves within this very personalized way, because if you think about it, feedback is not just, in our model, can't be providing the right answers anymore, because some student might be watching The Empress on Netflix, like a historical show, and write down vocab out of this. It will be a very different task to another student maybe completing an online course. So it has to be very individualized. But to tackle the problem that it needs to be heard and the student needs to be ready for it, is feedback is only given when asked for. So what I do is, for every course, I offer 2 hours of feedback in 8 slots every day. So I tell them that I'm not reading and commenting on their portfolios, but I give 8 slots to every of my classes, divided each 15 minutes long, which is 2 hours every day, which is in total, though, way less time than I did spend before on my written feedback. And so far, the students haven't made much use of it. It has to be face-to-face or via MS Teams, like an online call or face-to-face. This is crucial for me to make sure that what I say is understood and it's being heard as well. Feedback time per student is limited. And I think this is something that hopefully became clear when I introduced the dilemma. We don't have ultimate time, and I think we are in sorry. Yes, we don't have unlimited time, and we are at the university, and I think they all deserve at least a chance or an opportunity to get equal amounts of our attention. I'm doing 15 minutes that I'm offering 8 times per course this week. If they were to all take advantage of that, I couldn't necessarily serve all anymore, and I would have to limit that time even further. And feedback focuses on what the student wants and needs. So a student that wants feedback, and I've hope some of you might have experienced that as well, but I experienced that during class in a lot of feedback sessions. When students specifically say, I want feedback on my pronunciation, they are also usually more ready for it. And obviously, the expert teacher opinion also comes in, because I might be able to say, well, look, your ultimate goal with this is to actually be able to speak. And I'm not going to push you, but we might want to point out a few things where students are just not aware, because students sometimes just don't know what they don't know. Or always don't know what they don't know. Sorry. Yes, and I think this is already the end of our formal discussion. The newest edition is feedback. I think we're going to see a lot more synchronous face-to-face feedback, hopefully, in a world where paperwork becomes more and more, and these loops can go endless. And I hope what me and David presented to you today is not like a feedback model that is a pretentious collection of homework, but more like a personalized and customized process in which students are able to track their own results and pat themselves on the shoulder at looking at that portfolio at the end of the year, reflecting on their growth, and providing opportunities for us to be more like coaches to them than anything. And yeah, I'm gonna end here. And thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Well, I think this was super interesting. We now have got time to take questions, but if I could just do a little recap on what David and Jan have shared with us. I think that the key point to take away from all of our efforts as educators is, and perhaps I hope that this talk has shown that it's not necessarily the end of the learning world as we know it, and much to the risk that we sound almost like evangelists of hopefulness in terms of the dread of AI, which is definitely going to finish with the world soon. I think all of this has forced us to go back to what matters, which is learning, and to bring the students back to what matters, which is learning, and to make our learning outcomes more about what matters, which is learning. But it has also shown the vulnerabilities of what we had become accustomed to do as educators, and also what the administrative frameworks, in a way, have expected us to do. So this sharing of blueprints that actually work to effectively guide everyone to, through that hill, whichever pathway it is, and to actually make the important conversations about accountability as one of the key ingredients of learning, and engagement as one of the key ingredients of assessment is very important, because from that first cloud that we had about portfolios, I think that when we talk about students hate assessment, we also seem to hate assessing. So why do we do it to ourselves? So I'm going to kind of open this question section with one little thought, and perhaps you want to talk a little bit more about these. I also see in all of these processes that a process towards removing barriers to learning. And I think that in this world where we have got an increasingly diverse student population, perhaps this is a move to cater for anyone and everyone, and to make the learning more personalized. So could you tell us a little bit more about whether you have found out that perhaps this is a good way to address inclusivity?
I can give you an example, okay? So this portfolio is through being very personalized and opening a lot of chances, it gives us a lot of flexibility. So I had a student last year that actually didn't do a lot of complicated things, but he read a whole novel in German, like a whole 800-page novel, because he has a very unique style of learning. And all he ever did was like, yeah, I read that novel. I could see his German increasing. I mean, extraordinary talent. But if I were to force that student, because he he's clearly has an SSD in place and clearly also struggles sometimes in class. If I were to force that student to do like listening comprehension and boring writing tasks or whatever, he would not thrive. And the portfolio gives him room to learn language through the medium of reading. And he speaks well too. Like, it's not that he struggles, but like he struggles with the mode where everything is sort of directed by the teacher. I hope that makes sense as an example.
Yeah. So we've got more questions now on the chat, so I may just go ahead. And we've got a question where we're being asked whether you believe that these SMART goals can translate outside the classroom once lessons have finished. And I can see how the bit is kind of going skills, that is continuing progression in another country without getting feedback. So what is your thought about that?
David, do you want to?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, it's interesting when you mentioned that because it reminded me that this year, HR in the department had a new process for reviews, and they actually use SMART goals. So it's interesting how SMART goals all of a sudden appeared also in a very different area. And yeah, I mean, definitely, obviously, being able to set yourself targets, being independent, reflecting. Yes, there are all sorts of skills that you need to develop, and I think having the students able to articulate that and to evidence what they've been able to do independently without having someone being breathing down their neck all the time, taking initiative and so on. If we encourage them, I guess, to package what they have achieved nicely, then it's also sort of a good selling point in a way for them. Jan, do you want to add anything?
No, that's exactly how I sell it to my students. I say, you come for the language, but you're going to leave with something else, which is like a method or a few tools that can be used beyond that. And actually, SMART goals don't come right from language learning. They were developed for quality management and then used to like a lot broader context. And
you're delivering learning skills, isn't it? That reflexivity, that habit, that ability to actually understand what is happening as they memorize, which is something I think, Jan, you mentioned, the students don't know what they don't know, but also they don't know how they are learning. So we need to really make it explicit, don't we? We also have got a question about motivation. So our colleague Anna, she agrees that the important thing is for students to learn and reflect on how they do so, but it's not always easy. I mean, they're not accustomed to doing this. They're accustomed to doing exams and getting grades, right?
Yeah.
So how can they be motivated? And I assume, how can they be motivated to engage?
That's a very difficult one, but I'm happy to start. This is actually what I'm working on right now every time. So I can tell you in the beginning, when I was offering these feedback slots, it took weeks until the first students came. And I'm still in conversation with my students, and it turns out many of them are very unsure. Oh, is this like, can I come for this? Is this something I can use the feedback office hours to? Because they are not accustomed to it. They're not used to it. But I think that the thing that we have to do is we have to discuss with them and we have to talk to them about it. Because ultimately, where does motivation to do something come from? It comes from seeing purpose in something. And I think I try to refrain from pressure as much as we can, especially in our context, because many of our students are doing languages on the side, and they are under immense pressure here in Cambridge, under immense assessment pressure. If I add more pressure and if I provide more very rigid structures, they're not going to do more. They're going to drop out. And yes, it's a fine line to strike, to be honest, also, because you want to show them that you care. But ultimately, I think if we add more stuff to their list, we're not helping them. And maybe they are overworked and maybe some need to drop out. I shouldn't say this to David, sorry. As you probably want numbers, obviously, to be high, but
we want people who enjoy what they're doing, right? But I think one of the dangers of some more traditional approach to language learning is actually that it kills the motivation. Yes, we have to motivate the students, but I think let's start by not killing the motivation that they come with.
That's really good. We've got 7 minutes more, so I will add Alison's questions, and then I can see Giskin's hand is up. And this is actually a very relevant question. So if a student is not asking for feedback, how do you know if the portfolio is going well? Please, Jan.
You know what? I love that question. I think it's a really good one. We discuss it a lot. And I will answer it with the counter question. Because like, would that student, if I was reading it, would that student be reading my comments if he's not having the time to come to my sessions? And I doubt he would. If the students don't come, I think they also wouldn't be reacting to my comments on Moodle. They wouldn't go through like opening the process of like opening it through Moodle. I do see a bit of a point of, and I'm still trying to figure it out, of reading sometimes the portfolio and maybe flagging up things where we see it. But I think the major idea for us was to put the accountability and responsibility onto the students. So in a way, I would be very surprised if a student thinks everything is going great and he sees a lot of progress in his learning. And I would be like, oh my God, there is no progress here. That would be really surprising. You know what I mean? Sort of, I think they sometimes rely on us to be like, oh yeah, I'm sure I'm just going to do something. I don't care what I'm doing here. I'll just submit anything. And my teacher will tell me if it was good or bad. And that's exactly the mindset that we want to break.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Giskin.
Yes, thank you so much for a great talk. There's so much to think about there. But I think all of us have got a big problem coming down the line, and that is that reflection is being used as a euphemism for detention in schools now. So I found this out last week, and I've seen it in several places now, that students are sent to the reflection room, or reflection is just straightforwardly being used as a synonym for detention. So now it's kind of yucking on our yum, right? We believe in reflection. We really would like students to do it and enjoy it. But we've got big trouble coming down the line. And in some ways, reflection has never been a perfect metaphor anyway, has it? Because you're not actually looking back at yourself. You're kind of going deeper. You're doing something slightly different. But what are your thoughts? We're going to have to address this, right? Because there's no way any student, high achieving student, is going to want to reflect. They're going to see it as punishment.
Very good point. It's a very good point, I think. And I can echo that. I think what we still want, and I think you're very right, we still want them to do reflection the way we understand it. But I do, actually it explains a few of the reactions that I'm getting now, and I wasn't aware of that, not being British, not being very close to the British school system, that there is a semantic shift there. And some of my students are like, oh yeah, now I have to reflect. That means I did something wrong, or that means like I have to reflect on like how I can be better or something, be a better person. Oh yeah, I wasn't very like studious this week, or like I was lazy or something. I can see that. I can see maybe it's time to think about a different phrasing. Or become clear about it in the beginning, to always remind them to say, well, the type of reflection that we do with you is not the type of reflection where people say, now go to the reflection room. I think that's horrible to hear. Thank you very much for sharing. I think it's a very important point.
It's an interesting point, and we've got some comments also in the chat. And I mean, this would open a whole other debate, isn't it? But perhaps it also goes back to that relationship we have with our students. We're not police, we're not their nannies. We don't learn for them or instead of them. Um, we're not always, showing the red pen, although I do have an inordinate amount of red pens. And it goes against everything that I know we're told. I mean, I've also got a green one. Uh, but the idea of the semantic shift is very important because you have seen also in the chat how, when we say feedback, students may hear grades. And it is how, it's almost Pavlovian, how we have to deconstruct the way that students have been taught, the deformations of the system, of the educational system. We have to kind of create spaces for safety so that they can actually dare to think that by asking them to reflect, they're not being punished. By asking them to do an assessment, they're not being punished. By telling them, oh, this is, you should do this in a different way. It's not about you being inadequate. It's about, how can you improve? So I don't know if you've got any final points on this idea of semantic shifting our way out of this situation and changing our relationship with the students on assessment.
Well, it's sort of connected, but it's something that we haven't talked about. And in a way, I'm happy that we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about AI. And it's a nice break, right? But actually, one thing that we've also made very clear to our students is that we do encourage them to use AI, and precisely in the context of the portfolio, where they can actually get feedback anytime, anywhere, as much as they want from AI. This also adds a different dimension to what we do as a teacher, and what Jan mentioned about the coaching dimension of our profession. So yeah, I think that it goes hand in hand, and I think in a way, when we started using the portfolio with COVID, we didn't realize at the time, but it actually made us AI ready because it was very easy then to basically AI hasn't been as big a disruptor for us as it has been probably for other institutions, because basically it just happened that our solution was also AI proof. Yeah, maybe that's the last word I wanted to have on that one. But, Jan, maybe you want to add
Yes.
No, I can just only thank everyone for these, especially the semantic questions. I think it could make a very nice paper called, I don't know, feedback and punishment or something. And very important thing to have in our mind, because these preconceptions really do matter. And I hope we can mitigate it, like you said, Ira, through our relationship to them, making clear what we mean when we say what we say. But sometimes maybe also finding our own terminology that doesn't trigger these ideas in students of what we want them to do. And yeah, the relationship level matters so much, and the semantics can be very crucial here as well. I will actually put it to a test. I would put it to a test. But hopefully someone here at Click will put it to a test and change a bit of the wording. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience for engaging. We, as I say, this will be published on our CLCC YouTube channel for everyone to enjoy, to pass on to colleagues. And I think, let's continue talking about education and sharing our best practices and the sometimes serendipitous solutions that we have found to the threats to learning that are coming from all over the place. So thank you so much. It has been wonderful to have you here. See you, everybody.